My name is Calvin Green, and I am a third-year DMA in Viola Performance student at the University of South Carolina School of Music. I'm talking to you today from my noisy and tiny studio apartment a few blocks away from the music school here in Columbia, South Carolina. In 2019, I began a project of commissions for viola works to premiere on my final DMA recital to commemorate the 1919 Berkshire Music Festival, a landmark event in the history of the repertoire for the viola. Little did I know then that 2020 would become what it became, with COVID lockdowns sending everyone's lives, especially those of working artists, into chaos. In a twisted serendipity, the 1919 Berkshire Festival also occurred during the Spanish flu outbreak, so these 2020 commissions are oddly tied together with the 1919 pieces, all having been written during some of modern humanity's most trying times. Of the 5 composers I commissioned pieces from, I recently sat down with one to have a conversation about music, creative process, inspiration, and how the COVID pandemic has impacted our artistic lives. Adeliia Faizulina is among the most sought-after and truly musically inventive composers living today. Her works have been commissioned, premiered, and performed by top-tier musicians like Jennifer Coe, the Tesla Quartet, and the Seattle Symphony. Adeliia has written a gorgeous piece for Shakuhachi and viola, a snippet of which you just heard. Also joining me in the conversation is Sarah Umezono, Shakuhachi player extraordinaire and my collaborator on this work. Without further ado, here is our conversation.
Hi, I am Adeliia Faizulina. I am a composer, vocalist, multi-instrumentalist. I am from Tatarstan, which is a part of Russia, and currently I am in Kazan, Tatarstan, with my family during these difficult times.
Awesome. And then, how did you get started in music, and what led you to become a composer?
So I think I had an interest to the sounds and to the music when I was really, really small, like a small child, almost a baby. Actually, in our house, we had a piano left by some our relatives. And so I got to know it. I got to know it makes sounds if you press the keys. And so I was really excited and spent hours sitting by that piano and composing in a way. And so when I was 6, my parents was able to find a teacher for me who taught me braille notation, music theory, and piano. His name is Evgeny Frolov. And so from that time, I started taking music lessons and really got into it. The way when you learn each hand separately, then you put them together. So it was kind of a really slow process for me. So that's why I was interested in improvising that way, having more freedom and playing music right away.
Excellent. And then you mentioned braille notation. Can you talk to us about your composition process and how you go about finding ideas and getting them onto into notation? Do you start with braille notation, or do you start with just like voice recordings or something?
Yeah, it's an interesting process. It is always difficult to describe because it involves many, many different aspects. But mainly, first of all, I need to have an image. And it could be an image of nature, the place I visited, or a memory. And then the other really inspiring factor for me is Tatar folk traditions and poetry. So I'm gonna use a song that I remember hearing from my childhood, and that's part of my identity. So often those tunes go into the piece. After I imagine those images, those sounds in my head, I go to the piano sometimes or to an instrument or use my voice. It's really difficult to define which one I am going to use. It's about inspiration and just, I don't know, making different sounds.
So earlier you mentioned that you usually start with an image. Can you give us a brief introduction for Winds and Paths and tell us perhaps about the image that you had in mind?
First of all, it was wonderful to meet with you before I started writing the piece and hear your ideas, hear the sounds you make, hearing your instruments. And that really inspired me to work on the piece, to start working on the piece. And hearing all those sounds also drove me to the image. It sent me an image of those sounds of winds and flutterings. So, for instance, I've heard Sarah doing a specific technique that really reminded me a harmonic trill on string instruments. And so I thought it would be wonderful to unite those sounds. A wind, that's a sound that flies away, travels somewhere. And I got the image of really big space in the nature uh, when you are kind of above, you know, uh, maybe in the air, maybe above a forest or anything you can imagine. But I imagine like wide, airy space that you fly and hear the sounds from a distance. Uh, and I think I also explored some eerie sounds on viola as well. Um, so, and then finally, I got to hear a song that I know from my childhood, a Tatar song called Anisa. It's like a woman name. And so I don't know, I heard this song, this song being incorporated to the piece, and that became a thematic material for all those airy, fluttery, white space sounds, I think.
So next, I'd like to ask you about what it was like writing for Shakuhachi. But before we talk about that, I'd like to bring Sarah in to explain what the Shakuhachi is. So Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about the Shakuhachi, where it's from, how you got into it?
Yeah, so the shakuhachi is a five-holed instrument, a flute played vertically rather than like a transverse flute. It's made out of bamboo traditionally, but it's also made for beginners with wood. Um, I got into the instrument because I um, received the instrument from one of my relatives in Japan a few years ago, kept it kind of in storage, and then picked it up maybe 4 years ago. I'm coming from a silver flute, Western flute. Going into this is kind of a very unique experience because the notations are totally different. We use a vertical down and up um, notation rather than reading from left to right. Um, the bore of the flute is a lot larger than a silver flute, and um, instead of keys, we just cover our holes on the instrument. So
Yeah, and what kinds of musics are traditionally played on shakuhachi? And then do you find it different when you're approaching a piece from like the more Western art music tradition?
So traditionally, the instrument is a meditative instrument. It came down the lineage of monks playing the instrument, and but we also play with other Japanese string players just in the last like few hundred years. So there is music for shakuhachi and shamisen, which is a three-stringed, kind of looks like a banjo. And koto sometimes, which is I think it's 18 string zither. in terms of playing this music in Western style, I mean, there's a lot of difficulties because the instrument is not created to play very chromatically. It's very difficult. It's possible, but um, it has a lot of covering partial holes and um, you know, mostly partial and just a little bit partial holes on certain keys, which make it difficult to play, standard um, major scale, minor scale, chromatic scale, what have you.
Yeah, thank you for writing the piece for us. It's absolutely gorgeous, and I think we're both, just so thankful for your time and your effort in bringing this piece to life with us.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah,
It was
sweet.
such a pleasure writing for you.
I'd like to talk to you now about some extended techniques that Adeliia writes into her piece to bring these images of wind and soaring into the music. Extended techniques are techniques that go beyond what we are classically trained as musicians to do, and you wouldn't find them usually in a Mozart symphony or a Beethoven string quartet, but they're used nowadays to bring certain effects into the music as the composer sees fit. So the first technique that I would like to discuss with you today is harmonics. Harmonics are a way of achieving very high pitches, usually, than what we are used to fingering in the same position. So if I play a normal F on the C string, get a nice round low pitch. But if I play a harmonic there by just lightly tapping the string, you can hear how the note is a lot higher than what would otherwise be fingered there. So here are two passages from Adelia's piece that utilize harmonics. Another technique that Adeliia uses with harmonics is harmonic trills. And harmonic trills are similar to normal trills in that I will repeat certain notes just by tapping on the fingerboard like this. But I will use the harmonic technique on both notes, so instead of a normal trill sounding like this, we achieve an effect that's a little bit more obscure and a little bit more wind-like. Another harmonic effect that Adeliia uses in her piece is a harmonic glissando. And a glissando is usually a pitch that goes up or down, or sometimes back and forth, without changing the fingers and just moving the hand up and down the fingerboard. In this piece, Adeliia uses a harmonic glissando in a similar manner to achieve a wind-like effect. The next technique I'd like to demonstrate for you is called Col Legno Tratto. Col Legno in Italian means with the wood, so with the wood of the bow, and tratto means drawn. Usually when we see Col Legno as string musicians, we think Col Legno battuto, just knocking the wood of the bow against the string. But Col Legno Tratto, we draw the bow using the wood. Another bow technique that Adeliia writes into the piece is playing on the bridge and solpant. Now, usually when we see solpant, that means on the bridge for us. So solpanticello in Italian means on the bridge of the instrument. What Adeliia means when she writes on the bridge in English is to literally play on the bridge, creating a wispy sound. Whereas usually an Italian solpant is just played on the string near the bridge to create a very whistly sound. So in this piece, Adeliia writes on the bridge transition to solpanticello while doing a harmonic trill, and it creates an interesting effect.